Welcome, I'm Li Nuttall and I'm a second year master's student at Bangor University. My talk today is going to be on climate anxiety and how that relates to counselling. So climate anxiety is defined as a chronic fear of environmental doom which can negatively affect mental health and well-being. This can be through direct or indirect exposure to climate change and can result in poor mental and or physical health. And it can lead to issues such as rumination, poor concentration, and affects the ability to work or socialise. But actually quite an important issue is the lack of recognition of climate anxiety in the DSM-5. So what that could mean is there's a possible underestimation of the prevalence and impact of climate anxiety. So when looking into this topic, one of the variables which we chose was self-stigma surrounding help-seeking behaviour. And why is that important? So 75% of British adults express concerns about climate change. However, despite this, many just don't seek help from a mental health practitioner. Why is that? So possibly could be due to self-stigma, and self-stigma refers to negative attitudes towards one's own mental health, which can occur due to negative repercussions such as job loss, the connotations surrounding mental health, negative connotations that is. So what does the research suggest? Well, the research suggests that self-stigma is linked to hopelessness and poor treatment outcomes. So raising awareness of self-stigma and its impact has the potential to reduce this barrier. However, more research is needed to fully understand the impact of self-stigma on individuals with climate change anxiety, because at the moment the research is very, very limited. So our third variable is hope, and when we were looking into hope, the research suggests that hope has been associated with better treatment outcomes in various fields. So some of those areas are things like education, sport, physical health, psychotherapy. So hope has also been shown in climate change research that it could possibly counteract the effects of helplessness and pessimism. But there does seem to be few studies that explore hope as a protected factor for people with climate anxiety. So how does climate anxiety relate to counselling? So firstly, the aim of counselling for climate anxious people is to help clients manage their emotional and psychological distress. So counselling can provide tools to address anxiety and fear and helplessness. It can also reduce some of those cognitive distortions such as catastrophic thinking. Counselling has the potential to address self-stigma surrounding help-seeking behaviour. So by acknowledging the impact of climate anxiety, therapists can help clients to devise effective coping mechanisms and tools to manage those emotions. So obviously in our field that's actually really interesting. So the aim of this study was to explore the links between prior counselling experiences with levels of climate anxiety, self-stigma and hope, because from the research that we had conducted, there seems to be a real need for exploratory studies to understand these interactions in order to overcome self-stigma and foster hope by developing appropriate interventions and coping strategies. So on to the method section. Firstly, the design. So the design of the study was a self-administered cross-sectional survey, which was created using Qualtrics software. The participants completed one questionnaire each, which consisted of 3 standardised measures. And at the end of the study, towards the end, there was 3 closed questions about counselling experiences. The participants were from a global sample, but for this study, we only wanted a UK sample. So there was no exclusion criteria, other than that the participants needed to be 18. But when we went to analyse the data, we cleaned it from the worldwide participants. And then onto the ethics. The study was ethically approved in accordance with Bangor University. We adhered to the BPS and BACP guidelines, but due to the existential nature of the study, it was deemed that some participants may find some of the questions distressing. So on the information sheet at the beginning and at the end, there was some support numbers such as the Samaritans and Mind, and also all participants had the right to withdraw at any time. Okay, so on to the measures. As I said earlier, we used 3 standardised measures. So the first one was Self-stigma of help-seeking scale. The second was the climate change anxiety scale. And the third one was the adult hope scale. So on to the results section. So firstly, we've got the demographic information. So participants. We had a total of 417 participants, but as I said earlier, that was from the whole of the world. So there was 133 international participants, and their data sets were removed, leaving 284 UK responses to be analysed, because this study was purely for the UK. Gender-wise, there was more people identified as female than male. Age ranges, real range there. So we have youngest being 18, oldest being 77. The mean age was 40. Ethnicity-wise, the sample was the majority of people in the sample identified as white. So prior counselling experiences, how did we measure this? Well, I conducted an independent samples t-test to compare the mean levels of climate anxiety, self-stigma and hopefulness between participants who had received prior counselling and those who had not received counselling. So what did that show? Well, the results showed that 185 people had received prior counselling, which equated to 65%, which was actually a lot more people than I thought. 95 participants had not received any counselling, and 4 people preferred not to answer. So how did this relate to climate anxiety? So participants who had received prior counselling reported a significant higher level of climate anxiety than those who had not. So people that had experienced counselling were actually more anxious. How did that relate to self-stigma? So participants who had received prior counselling reported a significantly lower level of self-stigma than those who had not, which is really interesting because obviously there's this could indicate that counselling reduces the levels of self-stigma. And what did that mean for hopefulness? Well, for hopefulness, there was no significant difference between the 2 groups, so no significance at all. So the final question in the survey was, would the participants consider counselling for climate change anxiety? which we thought was actually a really good question to ask, because it gives you an indication whether people think what actually people think of climate anxiety and whether there is a real need for counselling. So only 81 people said yes, they would consider counselling for climate change anxiety. And the majority of people said no, which was 194 people, equating to 68%. So a really large proportion wouldn't seek counselling for climate anxiety. So on to the discussion. Firstly, the prevalence of climate anxiety in counselling. And what does that mean? So the results indicate that climate anxiety is becoming more prevalent in counselling. How do we know that? Because 44 people who had received prior counselling said they had already discussed climate anxiety with their therapist, which was a really interesting finding. Also, there seems to be negative associations surrounding climate anxiety, which could be making clients reluctant to discuss it in therapy, preventing them potentially from addressing the issue altogether. So it's important for counsellors to recognise and address any these issues with their clients in order to manage climate anxiety in the future. So, willingness to seek counselling for climate anxiety, and what conclusions did we draw? So, more than half of the participants in the study were not willing to seek counselling for climate anxiety. So, this could be the result of a lack of awareness about counselling and the benefits, potentially things such as fear of being judged or stigma. Also, it could be an indication of the limited access and availability of counselling services for the people that we surveyed. There's potential for the belief that climate anxiety is actually not even a significant issue. So these are just some of the conclusions that we could draw based on what we found in this study. So that would suggest that an increased awareness and accessibility of counselling services are needed to address climate anxiety effectively. So what are the implications for mental health policies and interventions? Well, for this study, we would say that we contribute valuable insights to the limited literature on climate anxiety which is currently available. And we can highlight some potential barriers and protective factors that influence help-seeking behaviours in climate-anxious people. So the findings could have significant implications for mental health policies and interventions, which would enable policymakers and clinicians to tailor support to specific needs of climate-anxious people. This then would result in enhanced quality of care and interventions for people suffering from climate anxiety. So what are some of the cognitive interventions for reducing self-stigma? So the research suggests that cognitive interventions could help clients to reframe their thoughts, beliefs and attitudes so that they're more accepting of themselves. And the evidence suggests that these interventions could help clients move away from unhelpful thinking habits, such as catastrophizing about climate change issues. So some of the evidence suggests that CBT can help clients challenge these negative thoughts and cognitive distortions, and thus reducing climate anxiety. So what are some of the other interventions that could help reduce self-stigma? So some of the research suggests that a psychoeducational approach can reduce self-stigma and promote active help-seeking behaviour. So it can help clients to understand their role in the world and normalise their feelings of guilt related to climate change. Using a psychoeducation approach is important because it can help people validate their concerns and thus reduce self-stigma. So what could some areas of future research be, and what would that look like? What was the limitations of this study? So some of the limitations was that the sample was primarily white, and so that may be difficult to generalise to other ethnic groups. It was also a cross-sectional design, which makes it difficult to make causal inferences. So future research directions, we could recruit from a more diverse sample, which could help us to understand more marginalised communities. Additionally, we could also use a longitudinal or an experimental design to explore the causal relationships. Also, some of the research out there does indicate that social and cultural beliefs could be a factor in climate change research, which we haven't even looked at or touched on at all in this study. What are the importance of future research? So the importance is to develop effective interventions to reduce self-stigma as a contributing factor. And still in this area, there's a real lack of studies exploring the effectiveness of counselling for promoting hopefulness as a coping mechanism and how self-stigma interacts with help-seeking behaviour. So finally, what are some of the take-home messages from the study? Well, counsellors should be equipped with appropriate training and resources to address climate anxiety effectively. Counselling can help individuals manage and cope with their climate anxiety, leading to reduced self-stigma and a positive self-image. However, counselling may not be significant on the impact of hopefulness as a mechanism for climate anxiety, so further research would be required. So this is coming to the end of my talk today now, but please feel free to go and have a look at my handbook. We had a couple of other hypotheses in this study, which are all detailed in the handbook with the rest of the findings. So I'd like to invite any questions, and thank you for listening to my talk today.